everyone, my name is Rachel. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am here to talk about some books that I absolutely need to read in 2023. So the first 12 books that I have to talk about are a part of the 12 books challenge that has been going around on Instagram. So I'm gonna put a screenshot over here. Basically, you ask your friends to recommend a book to you until you get 12 recommendations, and then the goal is to read all 12 of those books in the coming year. So I'm very intrigued by all of these books. My only requirement when it came to asking for recommendations is that I wanted truly epic books and or epic romances. So let's go ahead and get into this list. First of all, we have You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty by Akwaeke Emezi. As far as I know, this is Akwaeke Emezi's first romance novel, and I think this is like an ex-boyfriend or an ex-fling's dad romance. So very intrigued about that for sure. I've heard nothing but really positive things about this book for sure. Next up, we have Broken Records by Bree Bennett. So this is a contemporary marriage of convenience. I'm gonna read the synopsis here. It says, Lucy ran away from home to restart her life and find some peace and quiet at last. Instead, she finds a washed-up rock star who splits his time between the bottom of a whiskey glass and the front page of the tabloids. But when he offers her the one thing she craves most, a safe place to live in exchange for a marriage of convenience, Lucy must decide if dealing with his rock star shenanigans is worth the risk of losing her heart. That sounds really, really great for sure. Next up, we have The Winter King by C.L. Wilson. So this is an epic fantasy romance from what I understand, and I just tried looking up the synopsis and it sounds very complicated, so I'm not gonna try to summarize it here, but it does sound very interesting to say the least. Next up, we have Restore Me by J.L. Seegers. So we have Sloane and Dominic as our two main characters, and it says, Dominic Alexander is my late husband's best friend and the last man on earth I should want. For the last 10 years, he's taken a sick pleasure in making me feel paper thin, like my entire existence is of no consequence to him at all. But now things are different after one drunken night and a surprisingly sexy act of heroism. He started to be nice. I mean, that's all I need to know. I'm not gonna read any more of the synopsis. Next up, we have A Kingdom of Dreams by Judith McNaught. I've definitely been intrigued by this book and by this author, but I know that Samantha from Books with Samantha like absolutely hates this author's books, so I don't know, we'll see, but I'm gonna give this a chance. This is about Jennifer, who is abducted from her convent school by Royce, who is the Duke of Claymore. Known as the Wolf, his very name strikes terror in the hearts of his enemies, but proud Jennifer will have nothing to do with the fierce English warrior who holds her captive. You know, sounds like a classic captor-captive romance, so we'll see. I'm definitely gonna give this a chance. This is more of an old school historical romance, by the way. Next up, we have Choosing Theo by Victoria Aveline, not really sure how to pronounce that name. Sounds like another kidnapping situation. It says, being kidnapped by aliens is only the start of Jade's problems. Thankfully, her rescuers, an alien race known as the Claycanians, I don't know how to pronounce that word, are willing to protect her, but she has to stay on their planet for 1 year and respect the rules of their culture, including choosing a husband. That sounds very interesting. I have heard really good things about this, and this has an average rating of 4.19 on Goodreads, so I have very high hopes. I haven't read that many alien romances. The only ones that I've read have been the Ice Planet Barbarian series by Ruby Dixon, so very intrigued to try more of them. So next up, we have The Jade Temptress by Jeannie Lin. This is book 2 in a series. Book 1 was The Lotus Palace, so I might go back and read that book first, but I was told that I don't have to. So this takes place in Pinkang Lee, which is home of the celebrated Lotus Palace courtesans and a place of beauty and treachery. Charming and seductive, Ming Yu is the most sought-after hostess in the pleasure quarter. She has all men wrapped around her finger except Constable Wu Kaifeng, the one man she can't resist, the only man to have placed her in chains. Interesting. I'm not really sure of the time and place that this series takes place in, but it seems like there might be geishas involved, so maybe that's China. I don't know. I need to look more into that, but I've never really read a historical outside of Europe or, you know, like the Western world, you know? So I'm very, very intrigued about this. The cover is absolutely stunning in my opinion. Next up we have The Silent Waters by Brittany Cherry. I'm so happy to have a recommendation by Brittany Cherry on this list. This is a book that's part of her like Element series, but I know that none of the books really have any real connection to each other. I think the heroine is mute. And this says, a piece of me was stolen away, and the only person who could truly hear my silence was Brooks Griffin. He was the light during my dark days, the promise of tomorrow until tragedy found him. Tragedy that eventually drowned him in a sea of memories. So with Brittany Cherry, you gotta know going in that it's going to emotionally wreck you. The two books that I've read by her have absolutely done that. I had to be ready, you know, I had to be in the right mindset to go into this one, but I've heard nothing but phenomenal things, so I'm definitely very much looking forward to this. So last but not least on this list of 12 books, I have 3 books that I physically own. So next up is All Roads Lead Here by Mariana Zapata, the queen of slow burn romances. This one is specifically a small town romance between Aurora, who moves back to her small town, it sounds like, and then the hero, who I think his name's Rhodes, right? He is now her landlord, and it's a romance between the two of them. Pretty sure he's a grumpy hero, and I've heard nothing but phenomenal things. I've been planning on reading this book soon anyway because it's just a personal goal of mine to read a Mariana Zapata book at least once a year, and this was kind of the next book on my list. I've heard nothing but phenomenal things about this one. Then we have Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. This won Book of the Year from Book of the Month. So this is about two friends often in love but never lovers come together as creative partners in the world of video game design, where success brings them fame, joy, tragedy, duplicity, and ultimately a kind of immortality. So there might be a romantic element to this, but I know it's not a romance novel. I think it's just like literary contemporary fiction. So very intrigued. I really like the cover. I'm here for that. And then last but certainly not least on this challenge, we have Outlander by Diana Gabaldon. I have owned this book for probably well over 2 years at this point, and I actually included this in a list of books that I had for books I wanted to read in 2022, and that didn't happen. It's not going to happen. Oops. But I was messaging with Jen from the Book Refuge, and she was giving me a couple of different recommendations to add on to this challenge. And I messaged back and I said, what if I finally read Outlander, because it's one of her favorite series of all time. I know that Jamie, the hero in this, is her book husband. But she was like, no, I don't want the pressure of recommending that because what if you hate it? But I decided to add this to the challenge anyway because I'm just very intrigued about this story, and I do eventually want to check out the TV adaptation as well. All I know is that this involves time travel. It starts in 1945 with our heroine Claire. She's a former British combat nurse, and she ends up time traveling to 1743. I know this is more historical fiction, but it does have a very strong romantic element to it, and I'm very, very intrigued for sure. So let's get to a few more books and series that I really want to get to next year. First up, we have Sapphire Flames. This is book 4 in the Hidden Legacy series by Ilona Andrews. So I read the first trilogy of this series last year, the year before, I can't even remember at this point. So book 6 and the third and final book of this trilogy very recently came out, maybe in August or something like that. So I really need to just binge the rest of the series. I think I'm gonna go back, read the first trilogy, and then binge the second trilogy. This is a phenomenal urban fantasy romance series. I can't rave about it enough. It's kind of unreal that I haven't read these books yet. I'm very excited about Catalina and Alessandro's story and how the plot as a whole is going to move forward. The world and the magic system is very interesting. So cool. I'm definitely gonna read the entirety of the Kingmaker series by Miss Sophie Lark. I read the entirety of the Brutal Birthright series this year, and this is the spin-off series, also the second generation series to the story, where this takes place at a mafia college that has Hogwarts Hogwarts vibes, and I've just heard nothing but amazing things about all of the books in this series. Very, very, very excited for sure. I do quickly want to talk about the last 3 books that we have to read for SJM Along, which is a Sarah J. Maas read-along that was organized by Jen from the Book Refuge. So in January, oh my god, these books are so heavy. In January, we are reading House of Earth and Blood, book 1 in the Crescent City series. Very excited to reread this first book of the series. Then in February, we're reading A Court of Silver Flames, my favorite book in the ACOTAR series. I cannot wait to revisit Nesta and Cassian's romance and the story as a whole. It's just gonna be incredible. And then in March, we are finally reading House of Sky and Breath, the second book in the Crescent City series and the latest book that has come from Sarah J. Maas. I have not read this book yet, so I'm really excited to reread House of Earth and Blood so I can jump right on into this book, and I'm very intrigued and excited to see what this ending is, because all of my friends have been freaking out about the way that this book ends and how it changes the Sarah J. Maas universe as a whole. So like, very excited, but also a little bit scared. Then I have, let's see, I've got quite a few series that I want to reread next year. The first one is probably the one that I'm most excited about. So we have the Folk of the Air series by Holly Black. By the way, this dust jacket, which is absolutely stunning, I got from the Dusty shop, so I will link their shop down in the description below. But I am actually doing a read-along for the entire Folk of the Air series by Holly Black. So I am hosting this with my friends Christy, Melissa, Samantha, and Chandler. I will link all of them down in the description below. I always have all of my social media links down in the description as well, so you can go to my Instagram to find all the information for this read-along. But this is essentially happening throughout the entire month of January, and each week we are going to have a live show about a different book in the series. So definitely check out my Instagram, because I have a story highlight saved on my profile, which, like I said, has all of the information for when all the live shows are going to be and things like that. This is just the most iconic YA fairy fantasy series. Oh my god. And like the enemies to lovers romance between Jude and Cardan, like what? Amazing. Iconic. I adore all the morally gray characters in this series. Jude is one of my favorite characters of all time. I could talk about her for years, so I have a feeling that our live shows are going to be mainly us gushing about Jude. I love her so much. Then I was recently talking about the Lunar Chronicle series by Marissa Meyer in a video that I recently put out, and now I can't remember what video that was, but I'm gonna link it up in the cards above. What is wrong with me? Okay, but this is a science fiction YA series that are retellings of classic fairy tales that we all know and love, and I read this series for the first time in 2018, so I just want to revisit it. I loved the vibe and the characters. There's also a couple of spin-off stories that I didn't get to the first time I read this series, so I definitely want to make that happen upon rereading the original 4 books of this series. I also really want to get to the Illuminae Files by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. This is yet another reread for me. I love this science fiction series with my heart and soul. I love the multimedia aspect to it. It's so well done, so cool. The story of this series as a whole and the books individually, it's just so interesting and unlike anything else that I've ever read. And oh my god, if you don't listen to the audiobooks for this series while following along with the physical or ebook version, you are seriously missing out. This is a book and series that you absolutely need to take in both formats, because there's just so many amazing elements to both. And this is just paced so well, and because of the multimedia aspect of this, you will absolutely fly through these books. So yes, very, very excited about that for sure. And then I have 2 more series that I really would love to reread. First of all is the Infernal Devices trilogy by Cassandra Clare, because the Last Hours trilogy, which is a spin-off to this trilogy, the final book in that series is coming out in January. So I read this trilogy back in like 2018, I think. And then I read Chain of Gold, which is book 1 of the Last Hours trilogy, in 2020, I think, at some point. It's been a while. And so I didn't move on to the second book because I just wanted to wait for the final book to come out. So now that that book is coming out in January, I want to reread this trilogy and then jump into that trilogy. But I also am tempted to read just all of the series and all of the books in this universe. I don't know. This is hands down my favorite series within the universe for sure. Oh my God, so iconic. This third and final book in particular is my top favorite book by Cassandra Clare, and I don't think anything will top that. This is just perfection to me. So yeah, definitely gonna reread this trilogy, but I might reread more books in the universe. I don't really know. And then last, but certainly not least, I have been dying to reread the Diviner series by Libba Bray. This is a series of 4 books. It is a YA historical paranormal series. Our main character in book 1 is Evie O'Neill. She has this ability to read objects. So if she picks up an object, she can see like who its past owners were, visions about them, things like that. And so she moves to New York to live with her uncle. And she starts meeting these other characters who also have supernatural abilities. So we have this really eclectic group or cast of characters of all different races. And I just think that this series is so well done. I'm also thinking about doing a read along for this series as well, because it's only 4 books, but it's just such an amazing story and an amazing series that I would love to discuss these books with you guys. So that's going to be it for books that I really want to get to in 2023. Definitely leave a comment down below if you want to tell me about books that you're dying to get to in the new year. I would love it if you would also leave a like and subscribe, and I thank you so much in advance if you do, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!